Greetings, salutations, hello, fellow nations. My name is Phil, and that, of course, is Phil with one L. And I am a fan of the first Shazam movie. Came out in 2019, and I was really excited for the sequel, Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I went to the theater and I saw it, and I had a really good time, and was very shocked to come out of the theater and see everybody hated it. Well, maybe hate is a strong word, but very underwhelmed. And I saw a lot of people saying like this is the worst film in the DCEU and a terrible note for it to go out on, and it's not a great sequel to the first film. And I disagree with all of those points. I'm not gonna lie, when this sequel came out, I didn't want to go see it. It was the first DCEU movie that I contemplated just straight up skipping and waiting till streaming, because that's mostly because of the insane marketing. I could not escape that stupid, horrible trailer with the Eminem song mashed into it wherever I went.
Introducing the star of our show. His name is Shazam!
It was every YouTube ad I got, and it was in front of every movie I went to go see. It made me insane. On top of it just not being a good trailer, it didn't sell me on wanting to go see the movie. But that first trailer came out in July of 2022, and the movie didn't come out until March 2023. So basically, for a year, I could not go a single day without hearing, I just threw a truck at a dragon. Friend of the channel, Movie Turtle, he invited me to go see this movie because neither of us had anyone to go see it with. And so he basically dragged me to go see it. And then I watched the movie, and I was very surprised to just be flooded with so much joy and whimsy from a comic book adaptation that wasn't slop. After getting movies like Morbius and Black Adam just the year before that, I started to feel those famous buzzwords floating around in my head, and I started to maybe feel superhero fatigue, ? If that's even a real thing. It's a much heated debate on whether or not that exists, but I was getting tired of comic book movies for a second. And so honestly, I cannot overstate enough just what a breath of fresh air this movie was. I mean, the bar was in hell, but I think I can safely say that this was the best DCEU movie to come from last year. Yeah. I don't think that's a hot take. I don't know. And since at the time of recording this, Cinema Wins has yet to do a everything great video for this movie, that's how I know I'm alone in this. This will be my video in defense of Shazam: Fury of the Gods. Also, I know Nando V Movies currently has a series titled In Defense of on his channel, but I wanted to preface this and say that I started writing the script like right after I got out of the theater. So soon after that, I was on such a high, and so I couldn't shut up about this movie. Another friend of the channel, Morgan M. Steele, she works at a movie theater, so she got me the giant like movie poster for this movie, again because nobody wanted it, because nobody liked this movie. And you can't even see Shazam on this. It's just the rubble part, because again, it is so big. I literally, yeah. I personally cannot wait until the housing market crashes, so that I can afford a house, one that's big enough for me to be able to hang this somewhere. Because I literally have no space for this, and the frames for posters of this size are so expensive, again, because they're so big, that I just have, that's why it's still in the box. Let me start off by saying that I believe these movies have a genuine heart behind them in the form of director David F. Sandberg. He's a filmmaker with a very solid track record. His directorial debut, Lights Out, is a very fun supernatural horror flick that is one of the few to successfully adapt a short film into feature length. Annabelle Creation was his follow-up to that, and inarguably the only good Conjuring spinoff. It certainly is the best in that trilogy, and probably in my top 3 for that franchise. And then he gave us the Shazam movies. Sam Raimi famously loved the first Shazam, and that makes sense because it feels very much like a movie he made. The way you can feel Sandberg's horror roots weaving its way in and out of this family-friendly superhero film so seamlessly feels so much like the DNA of the original Spider-Man trilogy. When this moment in particular happened, a huge smile just crept across my face. This actress twitching as the angle cants. I could tell this movie wasn't taped together with studio notes and glitter, and that an actual filmmaker was awake and at the wheel. Funnily enough, history has proven time and time again that when you give a horror director a superhero movie to helm, we get some of the best stuff in the genre. Sam Raimi gave us Evil Dead and later went on to make Darkman and the Spider-Man trilogy. Scott Derrickson went from Sinister to Doctor Strange, which isn't a particularly great MCU origin film, but his direction is definitely the strongest and most memorable aspect of that film. And although I enjoyed Raimi's take on the character in Multiverse of Madness, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little sad that we won't get to see what Derrickson envisioned for his Doctor Strange sequel. James Wan went from doing horror to Furious 7, which, come on, don't lie to yourselves. The Fast and Furious movies are totally superhero movies. But Wan went from making stuff like Saw and Insidious to giving us Aquaman, which I personally didn't care for, but I think it's a fun little globe-trotting adventure. There's also Guillermo del Toro in the early 2000s with Hellboy and Blade. You could even maybe consider James Gunn as well, since he made Slither and produced films like Brightburn and The Belko Experiment, and you see elements of horror often in his comic book movies, giving us the gift of the Guardians trilogy and 2021's The Suicide Squad. And Andy Muschietti gave us It Chapters 1 and 2, and Mama. And when I started the script a year ago, I was going to say The Flash looked promising, but then that movie came out.
I know sex exists. I've just never experienced it. You know where it hurts? In my dick. Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, horror genre filmmakers and comic book adaptations have always seemed intrinsically tangled in this fascinating way. David is a very grassroots filmmaker, and the fact that he transitioned from the independent scene to these big budget superhero features, but his filmmaking maintains his personality, is very impressive and worth noting. There's a strong sense of self with these movies. They know what they are. Magic superhero adventures for the whole family, starring a whole family. They're not pretending to be anything else. But because these movies are supposed to be family-friendly superhero movies, it doesn't stop it from having this really dark, twisted sense of humor. When the team escapes to their lair through a porta potty, Calypso opens the door right behind them, and it's just a guy on the toilet. And in the theatrical cut, the scene just ends there. But in a deleted scene, Lucy Liu kills this dude. He's dead. It's so twisted that I wish they kept it in, because that's what makes these movies unique. The fact that they just don't hold back. For example, everyone in that museum sequence in the opening dies. They're turned to stone, but that's not reversed or fixed in any way. These people are dead. And then you have one of my favorite small little details, Freddy's favorite teacher. At the time I went to go see this movie, I had just finished rewatching Batman Brave and the Bold. So Diedrich Bader was already sort of floating around in my head, and I immediately recognized him when he came on screen. I thought to myself, oh, that was a neat little cameo. And then in one lunch scene, he doesn't have any lines, but you can see him sitting with some kids at a lunch table. It's such a small detail, but it took me back to when my teachers would sometimes sit with me and my friends at lunch. This, on top of him standing up for Freddy, are two very small moments that made Mr. Geckel, crazy name. It made him feel like a realized character. I totally thought Billy or one of the other members of the Shazamly would swoop in and save him. In a typical comic book movie, they tend to take that safe Saturday morning cartoon route where no one gets hurt, but no, you hear the thud of his body hit the ground, and I remember my jaw dropped in the theater because I wasn't expecting that to happen. It was so distinctly cruel that it caught me off guard. These movies have a surprisingly high body count for PG-13 comic book flicks. You also have the moment where Freddy's being tortured with blood-curdling screams that honestly kind of gave me chills.
Say their names.
The wizard pulling the splinter out of his finger made me shudder, but in the best possible way. It's also a really metal concept that he could just take a bloody splinter from his staff out of his finger and use the magic from that minuscule fiber of wood. It was a really cool and effective little bit of body horror, and I thought it was inspired. Holy shit! I didn't know Taye Diggs was in this. That's so disrespectful. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Towards the end of the film, this random woman almost dies from the seed being planted, but survives only to be killed by a manicore seconds later. That's so messed up. I love it. Horror comedies are my favorite genre hybrid, and although the film dips into darker territories at moments, that doesn't stop it from being pretty funny.
Because I'm gonna call the hot one.
Her?
No, the male hot one.
Him. Him?
Look, I mean, it's all subjective.
What is this Gatorade? Is it a weapon?
Sister.
The recurring magic letter bit with Helen Mirren reading the letter that Steve the Pen wrote from Billy verbatim with such a deadpan delivery kills me every time.
Violence is not the answer. Oh, good first sentence. Thanks, Darla. We'd like to make a trade. We'll give up our powers if you give us Freddy. Add unharmed. Otherwise, they're gonna monkeys paw you.
There are many elements of this movie to love, down to the tiniest details. Rizwan Manji plays in both Shazam 2 and Peacemaker, two DCEU projects cast at the same actor, and David leaned into it, deciding to retrospectively maybe make that part of the canon, and that's the fun of superhero movies. And one of my favorite tropes in movie sequels is when you take something completely inconsequential and unimportant from the previous installment, and then you make it the focus of the sequel. A couple of examples I can think of off the top of my head is the bagel moment from Spider-Verse, which is like a throwaway joke from that first movie that ends up being part of the motivation for the sequel's villain. The Knuckles show actually just did it, where they turned like the Olive Garden joke from the first movie and make it part of the motivation for one of the show's villains. I don't know if this trope has a name, but I find it hilarious and I eat it up every time. In the case of this film, it being Billy breaking and discarding Shazam's staff, which is a literal throwaway moment from the end of the first movie, but it ends up causing the entire conflict of the sequel, and I thought that was pretty fun. I thought that was a really creative way to like sort of thread a story out of almost nothing. One of the main things, though, I saw people saying was that these characters are two-dimensional and have no trajectory, and I think that couldn't be further from the case. Billy has an arc, which I can't really say for most of the characters in the DCEU. In the first film, he is a troubled foster kid moving from home to home. He was very juvenile and distrusting of others, while also in search of a home and family, which he discovers he has by the end of that story. Here in Fury of the Gods, he is now scared of losing that family he just found as they grow apart. He finds himself aging into adulthood, fearing being discarded by his foster parents because of it. Billy struggles with this insecurity until the third act, where he is reassured by his foster mother that that's not the case.
I know I age out soon.
Billy. My wonderful, kind, brave son. You will never age out of your home. Never.
The Vasquez family joins the ranks of the Pendergast parents from Easy A as fictional parents that I want to be my real parents. Kudos to Marta Milans and Cooper Andrews. They do a really good job with what little they're given. I really love the idea of people underestimating Billy because he's a kid and then being absolutely dumbfounded at the fact that he is a competent adversary. This is something that both Savannah and the Daughters of Atlas do, when in truth, him being a child doesn't make him any less of a hero than any member of the Justice League.
A true god, after all.
Now, I'm not going to pretend that the rest of the Shazam crew have an arc just as strong as Billy's, but they're developed enough characters. They have through lines in these movies. Pedro is shown in the first film to be struggling at school, and while not explicitly addressed in this sequel, it kind of gets acknowledged. As I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite bits in this film is Steve the Pen, and a joke reveals that Pedro has been using him to cheat on his homework, which is very in character. Pedro's sexuality is addressed here as well. In the first film, it is hinted at when the characters leave a strip club, and he says,
Not my thing.
In this movie, it only gets two more small moments. Pedro rushes out of a meeting to go watch baseball, which kind of hints that he may find the players attractive. And then later, during that film's climax, he comes out to his family. This is elaborated on in a deleted scene where we actually see Pedro watching a game. And Darla talks about how they should tell their parents that they're superheroes, which he misunderstands as her telling him to come out of the closet. It's a very short, funny moment that tees up his coming out scene later, and it's another scene I wish they kept because in the theatrical cut, his coming out just kind of comes out of nowhere. Mary is in the process of applying to colleges and is accepted in the first film, but in this one, it is revealed she didn't end up going. It's a little unclear as to why. From what I gathered, she stayed at home to help her family. During the dragon chase, she expresses surprise and joy at the fact that her parents bought the house. And in a deleted scene that takes place right after Pedro's, Mary tells an old classmate that London is a little far, which kind of adds to my theory. In this deleted clip, she is a Postmates driver using her powers to deliver food to a college party full of her old classmates. She catches a glimpse of the life she's missing out on and decides to join in on the fun. It's another brief moment that I think should have stayed in the film because it gives us a little bit more to Mary's character. And it also echoes the scene with Peter in Spider-Man Homecoming, which I really like. It's actually the one scene director David F. Sandberg felt sad about cutting. It also explains why she's hungover in an earlier scene from the theatrical cut. In another deleted scene from the film's ending, she is seen wearing an Oxford sweatshirt and calls it her new superhero costume, hinting that she finally feels comfortable leaving home, and that concludes her mini arc, if you will. Eugene, the gamer of the family, spends the opening of the second film going through the room of doors like levels in a video game. He even slaps a note on one of the doors that says M for mature, a reference to ESRB ratings. This character, I mean, I'm not saying like he has like a really elaborate personality. It's just gamer. He's gamer, but it's consistent throughout the movies. And that's it. But I mean, it's a personality. So you can't say that he doesn't have one.
The most oppressed group of all, gamers.
Then you have one of my favorite characters from these movies, Freddy. Is one of the strongest characters. He makes a joke about his mind being blank and impenetrable in the first film, and this, whether intentional or not, kind of it's foreshadowing to when Calypso is trying to corrupt his mind, and he actually holds his own against her chaos, which seems to impress Helen Mirren. I forgot her name. Jack Dylan Grazer continues to be the best part about these movies. The way he gravitates between comedic relief and heart is incredible and not at all an easy task. It would have been so easy for this character to be annoying, but he ends up striking that balance really well. I know sometimes films overshoot and have way too much footage, and that ends up on the cutting room floor by the end of production. This movie is already over 2 hours long, so I think they should have just leaned into it. But I simultaneously will acknowledge that not every film needs a director's cut. Oh. Sorry, I don't know what that was. I don't know if this is from the comics or ever really addressed in any other adaptations, but I think it's cool that every member of the family has a specific Shazam ability that they like to use. It's noted that Mary may have the wisdom, as Billy is always asking her for advice and she is often found studying for school. Darla is very hyperactive and thus most commonly uses super speed. Pedro uses strength the most.
Sorry, Pedro must have been working out. His goal is to get swole.
Oh my god, I do got it.
Eugene loves blasting things with electricity like he's in a game. You could argue that Freddy maybe uses stamina, as he's the one often rushing into situations to save the day, and mentally he proves twice in this movie the strongest against telepathic attacks. And I guess that leaves Billy with courage, which, I mean, that makes sense. He literally sacrifices himself for his family in the end. I can just imagine what an ordinary day in this household is like. Billy and Freddy are talking about superhero stuff, strategizing and making plans. Darla is doing arts and crafts. Eugene is obviously playing video games. Pedro is somewhere watching baseball because he has crushes on the players. And Mary is somewhere studying for school. They can't all have arcs because these are films and there isn't enough time to explore this in, like you would say, a TV show. but their character and personalities are consistent, which seems like the bare minimum, but not a lot of franchises can maintain continuity like this, especially when you change like writers and stuff like that. The third act of this film also is a lot of fun. As I've mentioned, these movies get dark, and this third act is no exception. There are stakes. People die, and that's cool. The crew cameos feel like kids playing around, and that also made me smile. Like, hey, film me running away from the camera. It's gonna look like I'm running away from one of the creatures, and it's gonna look super funny in post. This film is cheeky and very much paying attention to itself. Like, for example, in the scene just prior to Billy's sacrifice, Hespera shrinks the dome, and an angry Calypso starts trying to burn it down with her dragon. This gives Billy enough time to say goodbye to his loved ones. I feel like if there were any other crew behind this, like if this were any other superhero movie, like a Sony movie, if this were a Sony movie, they wouldn't have given a detail like that, and Calypso would have just disappeared off screen. And a lot of people would have made jokes like, where did she go? Why doesn't she attack him while he's talking to his family? Again, this movie cares about continuity and giving you a small detail like that, which is sadly just the lost art these days. We get other good bits like the Skittles joke.
Taste the rainbow, motherfucker!
Something I will never understand is why people get so upset about product placement. Like, we live in a capitalist society. There's a commercial in literally everything. So honestly, when I see an ad, I feel indifferent. And it's crazy when I see people actually get heated over it. I saw a lot of people who angrily used this product placement as an actual critique for why the film is quote unquote bad. Maybe this is a hot take, but I think when films lean into their product placement, that's when it's the most fun and excusable. Like Skittles here, the Krispy Kreme bit from Power Rangers, or like the aforementioned Olive Garden in Sonic. I won't lie, I giggle at it every time. I think it's funny. The original Shazam actor's cameo is pretty cool, including actors that played a character earlier in the franchise is a trope I will never get tired of, especially when it's done well. I find it really sweet and touching. I've gushed about this movie plenty, although I'm not saying it's perfect. It does have a couple of small problems. While I'm not against the idea of introducing original characters in adapted media, you have to make them feel as strong as the cast around them, like they can hold their own. Make them feel like they're from the original medium, even though they aren't. Like Harley Quinn, who debuted in Batman the Animated Series, or Phil Coulson in the original Iron Man. It makes sense that if you're going to create original villains for the Shazam corner of the DC universe, that they'd be rooted in Greek mythology, much like its central character, but this idea seems half-finished, despite the fact that Lucy Liu gives a spectacular performance as Rita Repulsa.
Laden World Eater, rise from the pit! Magic wand! Make my Gulzar grow!
The Daughters of Atlas are just as underwritten as every other villain in the DCEU. Their motivations are all over the place. Helen Mirren's Hespera specifically. She goes from, hey sis, go take care of that guy, to, oh my gosh, stop killing people, we're not cruel, this isn't who we are. In one of the deleted scenes from the opening, she even kills everyone's favorite MCU character, Harold from WandaVision.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
But suddenly, and like towards the end of the movie, she cares for our realm and she doesn't want revenge that bad. She only wanted it like a little bit, I guess. I think Freddy's romance with Anthea is sweet, but that doesn't entirely save her character from feeling a little thin either. Rachel Zegler is solid with what very little she's given, and the visuals for her powers of Axis are really well done and compelling. It makes for a very distinct ability for something I would describe as the power to make things go whee! Another point against this film for me is that it feels like the third Shazam movie. With Billy's fear of losing the family he just found in the first film, going through this arc of feeling old and disposable, it's only the second film and he's going through an existential crisis with the family growing apart. It feels like a mid-chapter is missing here. They just became a family at the end of the last film and now they're already growing distant and tired of the superhero game. This isn't helped by the fact that puberty literally mutated these children during the 4 years it took to get this film made, so they look so much older. And then Billy literally dies at the end of this, which I think should hold a little bit more weight. It feels like you should have had the first Shazam movie in 2019, a sequel where he fights Black Adam, and then Fury of the Gods should have been the third movie to wrap up a trilogy. Oh shit, I forgot about Mr. Mind. Okay, maybe the first Shazam movie, then Shazam 2 where he fights Mr. Mind, and then Shazam 3 where he fights Black Adam and dies, and then maybe Fury of the Gods could have been like Love and Thunder. It just feels a bit out of sync. Like, it's weird to have a Shazam sequel where Billy Batson dies, and it isn't because of Black Adam, the guy who is very famous for wanting this kid 6 feet under. Everyone's performances in this scene are great, but it's weird because if we live in a universe where they made a third film, what would the stakes be? Let's say The Rock hits Zachary Levi with the 1-2 Omni-Man combo. What's to stop Wonder Woman from coming back and being like, damn, again? Okay. And on the subject, Wonder Woman should have shown up in the third act at least, not the very end. Like, thanks for bringing our brother back from the dead and all, Diana, but where were you yesterday? It feels like the only reason they came up with the dome was to explain why no one else in the entire DC universe could come and help. Other than that, I think the dome is strangely pointless. I don't know why it's there. They explain why the villains do it, but it still feels a bit contrived. I can't even be mad at David for this incredibly forced cameo because this is so blatantly a studio mandate. Like, yeah, you gotta put a Justice League member in this so people will go see it. We're gonna spoil it in the marketing and everything. It's gonna be great. It's also a hilarious cameo because she just slowly struts in while her laughably grandiose theme blasts. It's also kind of weird because you had the Shazamly help save the day in the first film, but not in the second. It's just Billy on his own with the help of his depowered siblings and parents. Zachary Levi also wouldn't shut up, and I don't think that helped this movie either. I think it just caused a lot of people to just rally against it in spite. Side note, now he's going to be in Harold in the Purple Crayon, which is great. Like, why is he Harold? I get not casting a literal baby, but why not make Harold like a preteen? If you wanted to age him up, or in his 20s at the oldest. Why is he a man in his 40s? Hollywood needs to stop being afraid of child actors. This is kind of getting ridiculous. And on that note, Zachary and Asher never felt like the same person. I saw that criticism a lot for the first movie, and so I had hoped that they would fix it in the sequel, but nope. The man-child bit was fun and refreshing in the first film as a nice homage to Tom Hanks' performance in Big, but I find it to be overdone as time goes on. He's like 8 years old and very dumbed down, which would be fine if they cast a younger actor to play Billy that matches the original source material, because he is like a child in the comics. Don't get me wrong, Asher does well with this version of Billy and how it's written, but ultimately it fails to cement itself as a justifiable alteration to the source material. This isn't Billy Batson. This is William Batson. Like, this is a young man. You take that scene I mentioned earlier. You have Asher's Billy, who, with tears in his eyes and motivated by the love of his family, transforms into Zachary's Billy, who does a comical smirk and flies off. At no point do these performances sync up. Billy as a teen is more mature than Billy as Shazam, and it wouldn't even be as noticeable if the casting for the rest of the Shazamly wasn't so on point. Like, Megan Good does a startlingly good impression of Faith Herman as Darla.
Are we good, sister? You almost exploded me.
Same with Ross Butler and DJ Catrona as Eugene and Pedro. Adam Brody is literally Jack Dylan Grazer. Like, that's the same person. You can't convince me they didn't use time travel somehow in the making of this film. The director even poked fun at this in a Letterboxd review of his own film, and again, instead of seeing this as him sarcastically ridiculing his own work as artists often tend to do, I saw plenty of DCEU fans rag on Sandberg, calling him bitter and saying he was acting like a baby. And I think that on top of Zachary's rants, that just made people go even harder against this movie. I think the thing that really haunts this movie is Black Adam. Because they have that first movie in 2019 where they perfectly introduce and tee up the idea of Black Adam. Like, he's out there, but he's not the villain or focus of this movie. They just kind of alluded to him. They say he's the one who released the 7 deadly sins into the world in the first place, which they never addressed in that movie, in his actual film. For brand synergy, they put out a Lego Shazam movie that features him battling Black Adam the very next year. We had known about the Black Adam solo film since like 2007 or 8, and that was 15 years prior to its release, which is why that movie feels like it was made in 2007. Like, Black Adam should have came out the same year as Michael Bay's Transformers. Like, that just feels right. And so, yeah, it feels like they got to that sequel. It was greenlit, and they were like, okay, Shazam 2. This is the one where he fights Black Adam. What? You said Dwayne wants Black Adam to have his own movie. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's actually interesting conceptually, because we could do a Shazam sequel, but from the villain's perspective. You said he doesn't want Shazam in it? Why? Because he doesn't want to lose? It's in his contract. I think that Black Adam was the straw that broke the camel's back and cursed Shazam, Fury of the Gods, to not do well. That and a bunch of other things. If you look at the timeline of this franchise within a franchise, Shazam came out in 2019. Great movie. Everybody loves it. Everyone thinks it's a great throwback to early 2000s superhero origin movies, and it's a lot of fun. Then the next year, a pandemic happens and the world shuts down. So Black Adam gets delayed a bunch more times, and then it finally comes out. 3 years after the first Shazam movie. It had nothing to do with that movie outside of Jaimon Hanzu briefly appearing in a flashback, but they never addressed that Billy Batson exists, which is crazy. Dwayne can't seem to let go of his WWE personality, the one that wants to kick literally everyone's ass, except for Zachary Levi Shazam. You have The Rock going on this press tour for that movie, talking about how he could 1v1 every member of the Justice League, and the hierarchy of the DC Universe is about to change, and Billy Batson and the Shazamly are just in the corner twiddling their thumbs. I mean, this character is practically wearing a sign that says, please, Mr. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, please kick my ass. And Dwayne is just like, nah, I want to fight the super guy. Seriously, how do we have a Black Adam and a Shazam movie that are 4 months apart and seemingly have nothing to do with each other? Even Joker, a movie I don't like, at least that movie has the Waynes in it as a bare minimum, because you can't do a Joker movie without somehow sneezing the word Batman. That'd be like making a Venom movie without Spider-Man. Wait. Yeah, they made 3 of those. Okay, well, that'd be like making a Morbius movie without Spider-Man. Oh, yeah. Well, that'd be like making a Kraven the Hunter movie without Spider... Oh, come on! So back to looking at the timeline of events, this movie comes out and is like, we have Henry Cavill back as Superman. Woo-hoo, yeah! Please give us money. Psych! Because 2 months later, James Gunn comes out as the new head of DC and announces an entire new slate of movies. It's a rebooted canon, and basically none of the DCEU movies that were coming out in 2023 mattered. This announcement happening just a couple months before this film's release. And then finally, Shazam 2 comes out, and it's like this movie just kept getting kicked in the balls. It was delayed because of COVID. It got pushed out of the way for a completely detached spinoff that was so terrible, it rejuvenated the superhero fatigue conversation. I think said superhero fatigue also did a lot of work against the movie. It's almost like the Lego Movie 2, the second part. A film that every time I rewatch, I enjoy a little bit more. It's just that it took forever to come out. The first Lego Movie came out in 2014, and the sequel 5 years after the fact in 2019. In the 5 years we waited, we got 2 very average spin-offs. Hot take, this might get me crucified, but I don't care for the Lego Batman movie as much as everyone seems to. I just don't think it's as good as the 2 main Lego movies, and I'm sorry. Maybe I should rewatch all the Lego movies, actually, now I think about it. It's been a minute. I don't hate it. I just, everybody loves it, and I'm indifferent. Anyways, the second spinoff, the Lego Ninjago movie, was so bad that it practically killed any interest general audiences had in the franchise, and by the time we get to the actual sequel to that first film, nobody cared, and so nobody went to go see it, and it flopped and killed the franchise. I think it's at Universal now. Like, Warner Brothers literally doesn't have the rights to it anymore because they just gave up. And so I personally feel like if Shazam Fury of the Gods came out earlier, if there was no such thing as a COVID pandemic, and no such thing as Dwayne The Rock Johnson, no James Gunn just yet, and they were able to get this movie out in under 2 to 2.5 years after the first, maybe like sometime in 2021, I think it would have been received a lot better and maybe have done better at the box office. Who knows? I also hate that cinematic universes cause so much strain on individual projects and their ability to exist independently, because it's very hard for them to. They have to tie into this larger world, or else people will immediately discard them as pointless and bad. Like the Marvels, first movie in a while that does an excellent job just being a fun Saturday morning cartoon episode of Captain Marvel and her corner of the MCU. And then, slight spoilers, they couldn't help themselves but to slap that multiverse crap at the end. And so it just feels like Shazam 2 kind of also is in this same category, because people expect big universe shattering implications. They want Superman to show up and show his face. They they want, cameos and how does this fit into the DC universe, instead of just focusing on it being, here's a coming of age superhero movie with a guy with these fantastical powers. But I don't know. That's just a theory. A Phil theory. After the release of Shazam Fury of the Gods, director David F. Sandberg stated that he was done with the superhero genre and expressed a desire to return to horror. He expressed genuine disappointment in the backlash the film was receiving from critics and DC fanboys alike. It's very rare that a film ends and while the credits are rolling, I have like a smile on my face. And that was the case here. Like, I had a smile on my face. That's exactly what happened as the remix of Elvis, A Little Less Conversation, just blared throughout the theater. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I don't know why people hated it. That's why I felt so inclined to make a video about it. There are so many superhero movies, just so many now. The genre is booming, and I feel like both Shazam films deserve to be remembered because they're pretty special. They're so much fun. There's so much heart. They've got great performances. They've got everything you could ask for from a movie like this. And now that the DCEU has concluded with a whimper, I implore you to revisit these films if you haven't, without the lens of a cinematic universe around it, and see if that changes your view of it just a little bit. Dear David F. Sandberg, because you're definitely watching this, I am a fan of your work. I became one after you made Annabelle Creation, which retroactively made the first Annabelle, which was a very not good movie, a slightly better film. I applaud any filmmaker that can do that. As someone who aspires to work in the industry someday, I love your YouTube channel where you give insight into your career. It makes the fantastical world of filmmaking feel more tangible. Despite how everyone feels, you made two pretty awesome movies. They feel like companion pieces. The first film is a great Christmas movie. Love to watch it every year. It's a great superhero movie, a great origin story. Fury of the Gods is such a good sequel that I believe picks up after that first film with great attentiveness and heartfelt direction. They have spirit, which is the best you can ask from movies in this genre, and I feel like a lot of people ignore that. I'm sad we'll never see what a Shazam trilogy would look like had circumstances such as time and studio resets not taken over with such force. And although you are done with the superhero genre, I do hope you return to it one day, whether it be for Shazam or something entirely new. As a fan, though, I cannot wait to see what you make next. I hear you're working on an Until Dawn movie, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. Sincerely, Phil with 1L. So that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're a Shazam lover or a DC fan like me, comment down below. I would love to hear from you. And this isn't meant to start any discourse, so of course, keep it kind. And please remember, at the end of the day, every day is all good, and if it's not right now, I promise it's gonna be. Take care, Nomies. I will see you in the next one.